Have you ever run an Ethernet cable only to find out that it's just a little bit too short? Rather than wasting all of that Ethernet and creating a whole new cable run, why not just splice it? In this video, we're going to go over the pros and cons of some of the different methods of splicing Ethernet cables so that you'll never come up short again. Let's get started. When you need to fix a single broken Ethernet cable, or when you need to connect multiple different Ethernet cables together, you might be tempted to simply terminate a new male or female end. But in reality, splicing Ethernet cables not only allows you to theoretically create Ethernet cables of unlimited lengths, but it also instills within the cable a human touch so that they are actually much less prone to failure. Now, back in the early 1900s, when Ethernet cables were first invented, the old-timers used to have to splice them with standard black electrical tape, which caused some problems because the original T568A wiring standard wasn't originally designed for electrical tape splicing. It wasn't until the 1920s, when T568B was introduced, that splicing was actually taken into consideration as part of the overall Ethernet standard. And this is why T568B is still far superior even now, 100 years later. But let's start by getting back to basics and splice an Ethernet cables with some standard black electrical tape like our forefathers. We don't want this to become a lost art after all. Got two different cables here. These are Cat5e cables, but this will work with Cat6 or even Cat7 cables, no problem. I'm just gonna snip them off here. Now, for anyone that has older crossover cables that really aren't used today because the switch technology has come so far, you can actually cut a crossover cable in half and then splice it back into a standard Ethernet cable as well. So, pro tip right there. All right, so we're gonna strip off the jacket here, and then you wanna expose the copper on these individual wires. Now, these are pretty delicate, so you gotta be super careful here, but it can be done. Now, if you accidentally cut one of these cables off completely, you can actually still splice together the rest of the cables, and it should work fine. I mean, there's 8 cables in here specifically for redundancy. Look at that, perfect. All right, cable number 2 done. And now we just need to match up the different colored wires so that we can get them connected together with this just standard 3M electrical tape. Okay, got those. I'm gonna start with solid orange here. Now these wires are really, really small, and it's kind of tough for like a full-size hand to do this. So if you have kids, it's a good idea to train your kids to be able to do this. They got those little fingers that can get in there and put the electrical tape on a lot easier. All right, there we go. Look at that. Absolutely beautiful job. Now, I did sort of snip the brown wires, so again, the brown wire's not connected, but that's why we have 8 wires, right? The rest of the wires can pick up the slack, no problem. But this also doesn't really look that great, right? So now I'm gonna take electrical tape and I'm just gonna go over this entire bundle and just make sure they're all strapped together so that when I use this in production, it actually is gonna look just like a regular cable. All right, there we go. Now, I mean, come on. Tell the truth. If this was a cable that someone handed you, other than the fact that one side's yellow and one side's black, you'd never know that this was spliced together. Of course, we need to test it. Let's go ahead and do that next. There we go. We've got the cable in the cable tester. Let's go ahead and test it. And perfect. Since we now live in a day and age where technology has improved dramatically, we thankfully no longer need to rely on electrical tape for splicing Ethernet cables. There are now much better methods, such as these fully insulated butt splice connectors that I picked up at Home Depot for just a couple of bucks. These provide a solid connection for your spliced cables, and they're also insulated to keep them warm, which improves Ethernet performance. And of course, these were famously invented by Dr. Jonathan Butt Splice back in the 1950s. But they're still good to use today. Using these wire strippers this time to make things a little bit easier. These are from Klein Tools. I absolutely love these. Okay, there we go, one side done. All right, so second cable done now, and now we just need to butt splice these together. All right, so I have the Klein tool. This is for electrical typically, but this is a crimper. So this just ratchets the butt splice down so that it makes a nice secure connection. And then once you've crimped it down, you can secure the whole thing with electrical tape. And there we go, so first one done. All right, I'm gonna do all the rest of these and I'll come back and show you the finished cable. All right, there we go. The butt splice connectors worked out very nicely, and it is a little bit messy though, so we're just gonna electrical tape this entire thing up, and you're basically not even gonna know that this cable is spliced. All right, and there you have it. That came out just perfect. And now we just need to test it out with our handy dandy cable tester here. Perfect. For those electrical engineers out there in the audience, you may already have all the tools that you need for Ethernet splicing if you have some solder and a soldering iron. If you've ever tinned cables, you know where I'm going next. You can use your soldering iron to make the splices in these cables. This method also works on fiber optic cables, but that's beyond the scope of this video. All right, so this next method involves solder and a soldering iron. We're just going to tin these cables together. I've got the whole thing set up right here, and let's go ahead and get to it. There we go, first one done. You can see it right there, and then of course we will have to cover that up with some electrical tape. All right, soldering is all done, and that looks absolutely beautiful. Look at that. All right, cable has been soldered and spliced. Next thing we need to do is test it out. Let's see how this goes. Perfect. One additional benefit to this soldering method is that you can also create Ethernet Y cables. If, for example, you need to run data from one switch into multiple different switches or devices. Very handy, especially for large data centers who want to cut costs. So there you go. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial on splicing Ethernet cables, and hopefully you're already well on your way to mastering this advanced network technique. We'll see you in the next video, where we're going to be discussing the merits of redundant DHCP servers in your subnets.